The concept of the second coming of Christ is deeply rooted in Christian theology and has been a topic of theological discussion, interpretation, and debate for centuries. According to Christian beliefs, various signs and events are said to precede the second coming of Christ, as mentioned in the Bible. These signs serve as indicators or warnings of the imminent return of Jesus Christ to earth to judge the living and the dead. It's important to note that interpretations of these signs may vary among different Christian denominations and scholars. Here, we will explore 4 commonly discussed signs associated with the second coming of Christ, drawing from biblical references and theological interpretations. 1. Signs in the natural world. One of the signs associated with the second coming of Christ involves disturbances in the natural world, such as earthquakes, famines, and celestial phenomena. In the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, Jesus spoke about these occurrences as precursors to his return. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 6 to 8, records Jesus' words. "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains." Throughout history, earthquakes, famines, and natural disasters have been interpreted by some as fulfilling these prophecies, serving as signs of the approaching end times. 2. Increase in lawlessness and moral decay. Another sign often associated with the second coming of Christ is the widespread increase in lawlessness, moral decay, and the deterioration of societal values. The Apostle Paul's writings in the New Testament, particularly in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 to 5, describe the characteristics of people in the last days, but mark this: there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Interpretations of these verses suggest that the increase in selfishness, greed, immorality, and societal breakdown will signal the nearing return of Christ. 3. The spread of the gospel to all nations before his return. Jesus also spoke about the necessity of the gospel being preached to all nations. In Matthew chapter 24 verse 14, Jesus said, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Throughout history, there have been efforts to spread Christianity globally, and some view the increased accessibility of the gospel, especially through modern technology and missionary work, as a fulfillment of this prophecy. 4. The coming of false prophets and deceptions. According to biblical passages, another sign of the end times is the rise of false prophets, deception, and the misleading of people regarding Christ's return. Jesus warned his disciples about false messiahs and false prophets in Matthew chapter 24 verses 23 to 25. "At that time, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Messiah,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time." The signs in the natural world, as mentioned in the Bible, are often associated with the prophecies foretelling the second coming of Jesus Christ. These signs encompass various natural phenomena and disturbances, including earthquakes, famines, pestilences, and celestial events. These occurrences are depicted as precursors or warnings signaling the approach of the end times and the imminent return of Christ. While there isn't a specific Bible story that encapsulates all these signs, several passages in the Bible discuss these natural disturbances and their implications for the future. Earthquakes. Matthew chapter 24 verse 7, New Testament, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places." Famine. Revelation chapter 6 verses 5 to 6, New Testament. "When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come.' I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. And do not damage the oil and the wine." Pestilences and diseases. Luke chapter 21 verse 11, New Testament. "There will be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven." Celestial signs. Matthew chapter 24 verse 29, New Testament. "Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, And the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. These verses, among others, are interpreted by Christians as indicators of the last days or the end times, representing the fulfillment of biblical prophecies preceding the second coming of Christ. They are often discussed in the context of Jesus' teachings about the signs that would herald the culmination of human history and the establishment of God's kingdom. While these signs are not narrated as a single story within the Bible, they are scattered across various books of the Old and New Testaments, serving as prophetic warnings or descriptions of the tumultuous events anticipated before the return of Jesus Christ. The concept of an increase in lawlessness and moral decay as a sign preceding the second coming of Christ is mentioned in several passages in the Bible, particularly in the New Testament. These scriptures describe a time of societal breakdown, moral decline, and a departure from godly principles, signaling the nearing return of Jesus. 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1-5, New Testament. This passage, written by the Apostle Paul to Timothy, vividly depicts the characteristics of people in the last days. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. 2. Matthew chapter 24 verse 12, New Testament. In this passage, Jesus foretells the state of humanity as the end times approach. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness. These passages, among others, describe a time of moral decay, where people exhibit selfishness, greed, disobedience, lack of love, and a general disregard for godly principles. The deterioration of societal values and the rise of selfishness and immorality are often seen as signs indicating the nearing return of Jesus Christ. Christians interpret these verses as warnings to remain steadfast in faith and righteousness despite the challenges presented by the increasing moral decay in the world. The idea of the spread of the gospel to all nations before the second coming of Christ is a significant concept in Christian theology. It's often associated with a particular prophecy mentioned by Jesus himself. This prophecy is found in the New Testament of the Bible, specifically in the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 24 verse 14, New Testament. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. This verse, spoken by Jesus during the Olivet Discourse, signifies the global dissemination of the message of salvation through the gospel to all corners of the world before the end times or the return of Christ. Additionally, there are other passages in the Bible that reference the importance of spreading the gospel beyond one's immediate community or region. Mark chapter 16 verse 15, New Testament, he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." Acts chapter 1 verse 8, New Testament, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, and in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." These verses emphasize the universal scope of the gospel message, urging believers to share the good news of Jesus Christ not only locally but also to the farthest reaches of the earth. Throughout history, Christians have engaged in missionary work, using various means such as preaching, teaching, literature, media, and more recently, technology, to fulfill this prophecy and commission. The intent is to bring the message of salvation and redemption through Jesus Christ to every nation, tribe, and people group on the planet. The belief is that when the gospel has been proclaimed and made accessible to all nations as a testimony, it will signal the fulfillment of this aspect of the prophecy, indicating that the world has been sufficiently exposed to the message of Christ before his eventual return. This is seen as a significant sign in the sequence of events leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ. These signs are understood and interpreted in various ways within different Christian traditions, and not all Christians hold to a strict or identical understanding of these predictions. The anticipation of the second coming of Christ remains a significant aspect of Christian faith, inspiring believers to remain vigilant, prayerful, and faithful while awaiting the fulfillment of these prophecies. The warning about the coming of false prophets and deceptions is a crucial aspect of biblical prophecy concerning the end times, as described in the New Testament. This warning was given by Jesus himself and reiterated by other apostles, emphasizing the prevalence of misleading teachings and false representations of Christ prior to his return. Matthew chapter 24 verses 24 to 25, New Testament. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. Jesus, in the Olivet Discourse, cautioned his disciples about the emergence of false messiahs and prophets who would deceive people through extraordinary signs and wonders, aiming to lead even believers astray. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 1, New Testament. But there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the sovereign Lord who bought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. The Apostle Peter, in his second letter, highlights the infiltration of false teachers who would introduce destructive heresies, distorting the truth of Christ and potentially causing harm to believers. 1 John chapter 4 verse 1, New Testament. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Because many false prophets have gone out into the world, the Apostle John advises believers to discern and test the teachings and spirits, emphasizing the prevalence of false prophets and the need for spiritual discernment. These passages warn believers to be cautious and discerning, as there will be individuals or groups claiming spiritual authority and offering deceptive teachings or false representations of Christ. The rise of false prophets, false teachings, and misleading doctrines before the second coming of Christ is considered a significant sign of the end times. Christian teachings often stress the importance of studying the scriptures. Subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.